Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this executive meeting of Thursday, the 24th of March. I'm Councillor Lynn Doherty, the leader of West Berkshire Council. Welcome to today's meeting. As usual, this meeting is being held both over Zoom and with councillors present and socially distanced in the second floor meeting area at the council offices. Joining me in person are the members of the executive, Councillor Steve Arderwater, Dominic Bowick, Ross McKinnon, Richard Sumner, Joe Stewart and Howard Wollaston. Councillors Graham Bridgman and Hilary Cole are attending remotely. Members of the shadow executive attending in person are Councillor Lee Dillon, Jeff Brooks, Adrian Abbs and Alan Macro. Other members of the shadow executive and the leader of the Minority Green Party, Councillor Carolyn Culver, are in attendance remotely. These members are entitled to speak and ask questions when invited to do so by myself. The majority of the officers attending the meeting and members of the public asking questions at today's meeting are also doing so remotely, unless they have requested to physically attend the meeting. The meeting is being live streamed via YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. Other members of the council are also in attendance in the virtual waiting room and can ask questions on any items included in the agenda. They will do this by indicating electronically, and I will then invite them to be brought in from the virtual waiting room for their questions to be answered. Members who are not on the executive are not able to vote on any of the agenda items. Please note, the voting to take place at this meeting will run via the use of our desktop microphones. The results of each vote will be shared on screen. The officers in attendance, either in person or remotely, include our Chief Executive, Nigel Lynn, Joseph Holmes and Susan Halliwell. Sarah Clark will be the legal advisor to the meeting, and I'm assisted by Sadie Owen, the clerk to the meeting, and Thomas Dunn, who is acting as the Zoom host. Do members have any questions about the way in which this meeting will be conducted before I proceed? No, in which case can we go straight to item 1 and ask Sadie, have there been any apologies?
No apologies received.
Councillor Dillon, I think you did have a late apology for me.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. An apology from Councillor Tony Vickers.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. Can we move then to item 2 on our agenda this evening, which is the minutes from the previous meeting of the 10th of February. I'm more than happy to propose those minutes from the chair. Does that find a seconder?
Happy to second, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Sumner. Members, have you got anything that you would like to raise with regards to those minutes? I see no hands, and therefore can I ask executive members to indicate by voting on their microphones if they agree that these minutes can be signed as a true and accurate record of the previous meeting? I can see from my microphone that they have, and therefore I'm happy to declare that the meetings have been approved, subject to the inclusion of the without any amendments today, and I'm happy to approve those. Item 3 on our agenda is declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest?
None that I've received.
Okay, thank you. And therefore, can we move forward to item 4, which is public questions? First of all, I would like to thank all the members of the public that have submitted questions for this evening's executive meeting, and welcome those of you who are able to be in attendance to hear your answers to your questions and ask a supplementary if you have one. For those public questioners unable to join this meeting, I can confirm that you will receive a written response to your questions within 5 clear working days of the meeting. Your question will appear on the screen and will be answered by the relevant portfolio holder. You will then be given the opportunity to ask a supplementary question. but please remember that must be to clarify the response provided and not to introduce any new business. In accordance with paragraph 5.12.9 of the Constitution, where questioners have more than one question, only their first question will be answered. If after all other questions have been asked and answered, and there is sufficient time, we will answer subsequent questions. Please note that the time limit for public questions is restricted to 30 minutes. And if your question has not been answered in that time, you will receive a written response within 5 clear working days. The responses given either verbally at the meeting or in writing will be published on the Council's website in due course. Can I therefore invite Councillor Howard Wollaston to answer Councillor Vaughan Miller's question A on the agenda? I can't see Councillor Miller. Do I assume he's zooming in? Okay, thank you. Can I therefore ask Councillor Howard Wollaston to respond to Councillor Vaughan Miller's question A on the agenda?
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Miller, for your question. The Council's publicly stated aims to improve leisure facilities through its playing pitch strategy, approved in February 2020, and its leisure strategy, which I hope will be approved this evening. The development of the Newbury Sports Hub represents a part of the delivery to this commitment. Whilst the now approved Newbury Sports Hub is a standalone facility, it may in the future be considered as a partial replacement for the Faraday Road pitch, if and when a planning application is submitted for that site. To be clear, the Sports Hub has been designed to accommodate senior football clubs, as well as meet the needs for youth and other teams. It is a totally flexible facility which incorporates every requirement to meet a step 4 pitch. It is intended to be a showpiece ground for West Berkshire, with future pitches being more modest in terms of facilities. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please. I'm not really seeing it, what the replacement strategy is from your answer, sorry. That would make it acceptable as a replacement for the Faraday Road football ground.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch what you said.
Okay, well, the Sports Hub is either going to be, hoped to be an exact replacement, something that fulfills the replacement according to the Sports England criteria, exception 4. And if it's not an exact replacement, if it can't fulfill that, then I suspect that's what you're putting as a replacement strategy, that it's a partial fulfillment of the requirement for it to be a better and an equal or better facility. So what else would be involved in that replacement strategy? Part of
an additional grass pitch.
That is it.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Can I move therefore to question B on this evening's agenda, which is from Councillor Foote to Councillor Wollaston. Is Councillor Foote with us? He's zoomed in, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foote. The Council is committed to improving facilities and sports pitches for both adult and junior football clubs, alongside support for rugby, cricket, hockey and other field sports across the whole district. This is demonstrated in the playing pitch strategy adopted by the Council and significant capital expenditure to create new grass and artificial pitches. The Council is currently working closely with the FA and Football Foundation, conducting a survey with West Berkshire football teams to ascertain their views on the standard of pitches. It is our aim to help facilitate local clubs to achieve the level of play to which they aspire. Do you have a supplementary?
Councillor Foote isn't amongst the attendees on Zoom, so he's not with us.
That was the question I did ask before we went to the question, and I was told he was on Zoom. So can we provide a written response to Councillor Foote? And can I just confirm that the rest of, well, I think I've got everybody else here. Thank you. Can we move to question C then on our agenda this evening, which is Councillor Ross McKinnon to John Goatley.
Thanks very much, Leader, and nice to see you again, Mr. Goatley. I hope you're well. The LRI Environmental Appraisal Report concludes that no in-principle issues have been identified that would prevent development of the LRIE site, and it states that the significant issues of flood risk and drainage can be satisfactorily addressed at the design stage during the planning process. Do you have a supplementary?
Perhaps you could give us a bit of information. That report basically says there's still further work to do. Various things to be investigated. So when are we likely to see a full EIA?
Any further environmental impact assessment work will be carried out at the appropriate point during the planning process.
Thank you both. Can we move therefore to question 8A on our agenda, which is Paula Saunderson to Councillor Richard Sumner.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Ms. Saunderson, for your question. The leisure strategy recognises the importance of accessing the natural environment for physical and mental well-being. The developing green infrastructure framework is projected to be fully available from autumn 2022 and will be utilised to support the delivery plan and development of high-quality networks of multifunctional green infrastructure. Do you have a supplementary?
No, that's great news. Thank you very much. I'm glad it's going to be threaded through the leisure strategy, especially in relation to open green spaces.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Can we move on then to 8B on our agenda, which is Councillor Gawley to Councillor Howard Wollaston.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Gawley. A corporate officer team has examined the locations for new grass pitches, and feasibility studies have been completed for 2 locations. A public consultation on this proposed development is planned before this summer. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Apologies. I missed your answer as I joined as a panelist. So could you just repeat it for me quickly, please?
It's fairly brief. A corporate officer team has examined locations for new grass pitches, and feasibility studies have been completed for 2 locations. A public consultation on this proposed development is planned before this summer. Do you have a supplementary?
Cool. Yes, thank you. So interestingly, the notes that attach the OSMC agenda on Tuesday with regards to the potential replacement pitches didn't mention.
Sorry, Councillor Gawley, you have to keep with the information in the question, not introduce new information at this point, and a report to a different committee would be considered as new information.
Okay, fair enough. Basically, that's great, but the note said that it would be a planning application. Doesn't mention anything about public consultation. So there definitely will be a public consultation, will there?
There will.
Good, thank you.
Thank you both. Can we move therefore to Councillor Ross McKinnon to Councillor Vaughan Miller, question D on our agendas.
Thanks, Leader, and good evening, Councillor Miller. No, I wouldn't agree with that. The Council's aspirations for the regeneration of the site have been clearly articulated on many occasions. These focus on an economic development-led approach that seeks to enhance economic activity, increase jobs and connect better with the town centre. The aspirations have never included the re-provision of a football stadium on that Faraday Road site, which is one of only 2 plots within the Council's control that are currently available for redevelopment, the other one being the former depot site. The detail of which will be contained within a future planning application or indeed applications. We are of course confident that the new sports hub at Monks Lane will provide a fantastic facility for football and other sports for years to come, in line with the aspirations set out in our playing pitch strategy. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Miller?
Yes, I do. I'm not sure you've really answered the risk element, which is in the main part of the question. So you're gambling the money on the sports for the sports hub to be a replacement for the Faraday Road Stadium on the basis that the redevelopment is viable. And it looks like if you looked at the numbers now, the redevelopment would not be viable from a financial perspective, and therefore there would be no need to spend the money you're spending on the sports hub when you could spend a fraction of that to redevelop the football ground there. So that's the point. Are you doing a revisit of the numbers for the London Road Industrial Estate regeneration based on the massive increase in costs that have been over the recent couple of years?
Well, no, I'm not much of a gambler, Councillor Miller, but you were probably pleased to hear that. No, the numbers you specifically cite in your question, I mean, we all know that build costs have gone up, but I absolutely wouldn't accept what you've said about potential sales values. That seems to be speculative on the very negative side. In fact, flies in the face of the data that we're seeing coming through to our economic development team. So no doubts about the viability from this end, but thank you for your question.
Thank you both. Can we move on therefore to question E on our agenda, which is John Goatley to Councillor Richard Sumner.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Mr. Goatley, for your question. The details of the government's plans for levelling up insofar as they relate to the reform of the planning system in England are due to be announced in the spring of 2022. Until they're published, we don't know about any potential changes being introduced to the targets for housing delivery in West Berkshire. We do see, however, from the Levelling Up paper under Mission 10 that by 2030, renters will have a secure path to ownership, with the number of first-time buyers increasing in all areas. And the government's ambition is for the number of non-decent rented homes to have fallen by 50%, with the biggest improvements in the lowest performing areas. Do you have a supplementary?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Can we move up? The next set of questions are all from Paula Saunderson. And Paula, we've got time for these, so I'm going to let Councillor Wollaston kick off, and you'll have the opportunity for supplementaries, but you've got Councillor Wollaston followed by Sumner and then back to Wollaston. So over to you, Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Paul, for the question. The answer is yes, we will give consideration to the amalgamation of the delivery plan for leisure strategy and the playing pitch strategy. They are in any event controlled by the same officer team. A contextual point is that Sport England requires data for the playing pitch strategy to be updated every 3 years in order for the PPS to remain valid. This is because the PPS is based on the number of teams and pitches within West Berkshire, and this can be subject to frequent change, whereas the leisure strategy is based on longer-term strategic developments, demographics, and public need and preference. The strategy proposed to be approved this evening is for 10 years. Do you have a supplementary? You're on mute, Paula.
That's really good news. I think it's getting a bit confusing for ordinary residents, which I consider myself as. So that's really good news. If we can have some amalgamated delivery plans, that would be fantastic.
Shall we move on to your next question then, Paula? Let's go to Councillor Sumner to 8D.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you again, Mr. Saunderson, for your question. I can confirm happily that the Executive Director for Place is fully committed to consulting with Newbury Town Council and parish councils, and this will include the cooperation of estates managers when looking at greater accessibility to open green spaces. Do you have a supplementary?
No, that's good news again. The forward plan was a little confusing for March, so that's fine. As long as you've confirmed that, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Should we go to 8E then?
Thank you again for the question. Potential sites, as I mentioned just now, have been identified and feasibility studies completed at 2 locations for the new grass pitch in relation to the lost grass pitch at Newbury Rugby Club. However, further sites need to be identified to address the overall deficit provision for both artificial and grass pitches identified in the PPS. The areas of the 2 new residential developments can be examined for their suitability for a grass or artificial pitch. Do you have a supplementary?
No, that's good news again, because the whole of section 5 in the playing pitch strategy is dedicated to finding new pitches on new developments.
Okay, thank you both. And then the final question this evening is 8F. Back to you, Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you again. The 2 strategies are complementary to each other. The PPS is narrow in scope and deals exclusively with the management and development of sports pitches. In doing so, the PPS delivers key objectives of the leisure strategy, namely to increase participation in physical activity, provide a modern network of outdoor sports facilities, and enhance the quality of green space. As such, there is no reason why there should be a conflict between the two strategies. Do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, so what would the position be if you want to put a playing pitch on what is currently an open green space enjoyed by dog walkers, runners, etc., and close to nature, which would fit in under the green infrastructure framework. So where would the priority lie there?
I think you'd have to look at it on a case by case, to be honest. But do bear in mind that a football pitch is only capable of being played on 6 times a week, so it's not a major imposition.
No, so the ambient for nature, it's the nature aspect, the green infrastructure aspect that I'm worried about.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Saunderson, for all your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your questions this evening. We can now move from those questions to item 5, which is petitions. Are we aware of any petitions?
No, none received.
Thank you. In which case, let's move on to item 6 on our agenda, which is the West Berkshire Enhanced Partnership Plan and Scheme for Buses. Councillor Sumner, I understand you'd like to propose this report.
Indeed, Leader. Yes, please. Happy to propose.
And does that find a seconder?
Yes, Leader. I'm very happy to second it.
Okay, thank you. In which case, back to you, Councillor Sumner, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Leader. I want to state, first of all, my thanks to officers in advance of everything else in relation to this paper. They've worked incredibly hard and with some really tight deadlines to improve public transport opportunities for our residents and visitors. The report for approval is for the West Berkshire Enhanced Partnership Plan and Scheme and is in accordance with the National Bus Strategy to Bus Back Better. The plan and scheme are statutory papers detailing how the council and local bus operators intend to deliver the objectives on the bus services improvement plan for West Berkshire. Another paper which was delivered in collaboration with our partners. They've been consulted on with operators and statutory consultees, and we have discussed in our Transport Advisory Group. The outcomes of all of those were no material change requirements. The delivery of this work will contribute towards better bus services and will in turn contribute to our carbon neutral agenda under the environment strategy. Plans for improvement include increased frequency services, new services, bus priority measures and congestion hotspots, a fares review, roadside infrastructure, promoting buses for tourism, investing in decarbonisation, passenger charter, and targets for improvements in satisfaction, journey times and punctuality. All very, very key issues. Collectively, we know that getting footfall for any public transport offering back to pre-COVID levels has been hard. As we move through recovery and as work patterns return to a level of normality, I believe it will be these sort of commitments for the improvements that will be essential with the appropriate levels of funding to support. Recommendations are detailed in items 2.1 and Appendix C, which is the full report, and 2.2. I'm happy to propose the recommendations, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Sumner. Councillor Arderwater, do you want to come in here or would you like to reserve your rights?
I'll reserve my rights. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. And members of the executive, do you have any questions for Councillor Sumner? No, in which case I will go to Councillor Macro first.
Thank you, Leader. The partnership documents refer to the bus improvement plan. Bus improvement plan has quite a few goodies, such as improved frequency, weekend services, and so on, which are all very, very good news. But just a couple of weeks ago, there was news that Reading Buses, who provide most of the services in this district, were cutting back. And I'm just concerned that there we are saying we're going to have a wonderful Nirvana in the future, but we're starting by cutting back. So could you reassure me, please, that this bus improvement plan will see the light of day and the improvements in it, please?
Yes, absolutely. And I think testament to that is a financial commitment by this authority to make sure that some of those more rural services are maintained. And as I said in my initial words, getting footfall back has been difficult, whether that's buses or trains. Public transport generally has taken a massive hit. So achieving some of these things isn't going to be easy. I don't think there's any assumption that it will be. It's going to be stretching. But I think that's the importance of partnership working on this, to make sure that we get as much done as soon as we can, but that we continue to work through.
Thank you both. Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. in broad terms, we support this improvement plan. I think that the connectivity, particularly to our rural areas, is crucial. But that's about having regular services as well as reliable services. And, if you've got a village and you don't have a bus for 4 or 5 hours in the day, actually, you're still going to have your car because you're going to want to get to pick your kids up if they phone up with a headache or something like that. So more to be done on that. And that I appreciate Councillor Somner needs much more funding than what West Berkshire can provide to those rural routes as well. So I'm not calling for it necessarily from our direct budgets. But I would like to welcome in particular your acknowledgement of Thatcham Town Council's request for support with the Newbury-Thatcham corridor. And in particular, the 1A, the 1C and the 1D services that go along the A4, do a circular route and then come back to Newbury. I know that residents in Thatcham find that a very useful service. And as I live on the main route, I can attest that I see enough people using that particular bus. Thank you.
Nothing much I can add to that. I think you've hit the nail on the head with your last comment on that, Councillor Dillon, which is that having people on the buses is absolutely the crucial thing. And the concerns always are those buses that historically toured around our wonderful countryside with only the driver on them. You're absolutely right.
Thank you both. Councillor Abbs.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Forgive my ignorance on this particular point, but given what Councillor Macro just commented on about cancellations, I'm really curious as to know what is the reference point that's going to be taken on which we'll be building back better from whatever rubbish government anachronism that we've got to learn now. And when is the reference point for we're going to be building back from?
The honest answer to that is I can't give you a set reference point. All I can tell you is that the work starts as soon as we approve this paper to make sure that we deliver everything that we can locally with our partners to put services back. We know where we've been in conversation with operators such as Reading Buses. They're not the only one, and where services have been wound back. That is there with officers' knowledge and probably the best way to do that. I don't think there was a set point. I think it was probably progressive over a period of time. What we're looking at doing is making it better than it has been.
Well, thank you, Councillor Sumner. But if I could push you on that point just a little bit, I think we need to set a stake in the ground to know whether we're building back it better or we've let it slip so far that we basically go back just to where we were, which won't be better at all. It will just have taken left and given right. So I think it's really important that we understand as members, as whether we're in control or not, what we're actually talking about. And if you wouldn't mind committing to finding out when the reference point is, that would be most appreciated.
Happy to do that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to come to you now, Councillor Ardwater.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, members, for your Is that still good? Yes, we're good now. So yes, thank you again, Leader, and thank you, members, for your supportive comments. Councillor Dillon, to our very parochial Thatcham point, I totally agree with you. And yes, we do want to see services maintained there. One point which I think is worth bearing in mind, and perhaps leading on from your questions, Councillor Abbs, is that this last Christmas we engaged in, instead of dealing with adding more car parking capacity, we offered free travel on the buses in partnership with Reading Buses into Newbury into Newbury, and I think that is an excellent model of the sort of creative thinking we need to be and I'm sure will be engaging in to build not only from any not artificial but any fixed benchmark, but in general a greater acceptance, a greater usage of buses, maybe from and ideally from people who have not thought of them up to now. So it is a difficult environment, absolutely. Operators, including Reading Buses, are commercial companies. We are not fully in control of what they do, but I think, as we've shown already, we can influence them, and we have a good prospect of improving this important part of our transport plans. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We have in front of us two recommendations, which is to approve the prepared enhanced partnership plan and scheme as set out in Appendix C of your papers, and to agree to making the enhanced partnership with local bus operators by the 1st of April 2022. So members of the executive, could you vote by using your microphone if you are in favour of the proposals to approve the recommendations? Thank you, everybody. I can see that that has found favour and that is carried. We're now going to move to item 7, which is the contract award for Pelham House, supported living services for adults with a learning disability. I'll just remind everybody that this is a part 1 and a part 2 paper because there is commercial negotiations and figures within the part 2 piece. So can I just remind you that before we start speaking to it? Councillor Stewart, I understand that you would like to propose this report.
Yes, Leader.
Does that find a seconder within the room?
It does, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. In which case I will go over to you, Councillor Stewart, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Leader. As the paper states, the recommendation is that Executive resolves to award this contract to the successful bidder, full details of which are provided in the Part 2 paper. The reason for the tender process is due to the current contract coming to an end. The new contract will be for 5 + 2 years, which is the same as the current contract. The value of the contract over that period is the reason for this needed to come to Executive in line with our contract rules of procedure. The Pelham House facility is an extremely important supported living service and provides care and support for adults with learning disabilities as well as physical disabilities in the service, and additionally helping service users to access the local community. The recommended provider scored the highest in all of the criteria and not just cost, and has therefore been selected as the winning bidder. I would therefore ask, when we come to that point, that Executive therefore approve the awarding of the contract to that successful bidder.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor McKinnon, do you wish to speak now or do you wish to come back later?
I'll come back later, thanks.
Okay, members of the Executive, do you have any questions for Councillor Stewart on this particular paper? No, in which case I'm going to go over to Councillor Macro.
Thank you, Leader. First of all, looking at the selection award criteria 5.4, I was rather disappointed that price scored 50% and quality 40%. I would have hoped that price and quality would have at least been equal, if not quality preferred. The award is to the existing provider. So could you assure me, please, that they were happy with the service that they had been providing in the past, I'm not sure whether it's 5 or 7 years. And secondly, from the confidential information, I note that the cost is significantly lower than the other tenderers. Could you please assure me that quality is not going to be affected by that lower cost?
I think the cost question will be part 2, which is why there's a part 2 paper. So I'd ask Councillor Stewart not to answer that second part of Councillor Macro's question until we get to part 2, but please answer his first part of his question.
I was careful not to mention any numbers or any providers.
Thank you, Councillor Macro. In terms of criteria, I also had similar questions when this paper was first submitted through to me. And actually, I think this is the right way to, we have a responsibility, obviously, with the budgets that we have and that we're managing in terms of adult social care, and quite often budgets and adult social care become the top conversation in many meetings. I want to answer this in line with your second question, actually, around the quality of that provider. We've been very happy with them. They have provided an excellent service. Our commissioning teams who work with them have expressed the fact that they are very accommodating, and actually the service that they provide to the residents that use the service has been absolutely excellent. So they were really pleased that actually when all of the tender process went through, that the scores came out in the way that they did. So therefore, I have no qualms in the fact that we're recommending this particular provider to continue.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Councillor Brooks.
This is a much more general point, Leader. I wonder if we can help Rebecca Braithwaite, who's the author of this, in the development of an executive summary, because that isn't one. It's 4 lines that tells us nothing about the information that comes later. It's a general point, and if you look at it, I'm sure you'll agree with me. I think it's a training issue, and I'll just feed it back.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. I'm sure that our Executive Director for People will take that on board and take that back. Any other questions with regards to the paper? In which case, Councillor McKinnon, do you want to say anything just now, bearing in mind we're not having a vote at this moment in time?
Only one thing, Leader, which is to say how pleased I am that the social value criteria for the procurement has appeared in here, 10% social value. Obviously, we introduced the social value policy just a short while ago, and this is enabling us in this procurement, as with lots of others, to consider local economic, social, environmental benefits as well. So absolutely echo everything else that Councillor Stewart said about the specific award, but really good to see social value coming into our procurement.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. We're not going to take a vote at this moment. The vote for this particular paper will take place in part 2, as I've already said. So in which case, can I ask that we move forward to item 8 on our agenda, which is the draft leisure strategy. And Councillor Wollaston, I understand you'd like to propose this.
Thank you, Leader.
And does that report find a seconder before I move that Councillor Wollaston introduces the report?
I'd like to support this paper, Leader.
Thank you. Before we do so, can I just ask the members opposite to lower their Zoom hands? You're confusing me as to who's trying to speak on what. Over to you, Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Leader. I'm delighted to propose the adoption of the Council's leisure strategy for 2022 to 2032. The West Berkshire Leisure Strategy originally went out to consultation in autumn 2020, with a view to adopting the strategy in late spring, early summer 2021. However, following a disappointing response to the initial public consultation and concerns about gaps in the strategy and associated evidence base, the Leisure Service was asked to undertake further work to ensure that the scope of the strategy was fully understood, there was a wider focus on different forms of leisure activity, and that conclusions and recommendations were evidenced by data, given the level of investment proposed. A second consultation process was undertaken called What's My Leisure, which generated a significantly higher response, and sporting groups were approached directly to incorporate their views. My thanks to Get Berkshire Active for their help in this wider consultation. The Leader suggested that the Overview and Scrutiny Management Commission, OSMC, may wish to undertake a parallel scrutiny review, and it was agreed that a task and finish group be set up to undertake this. This group reported to OSMC 2 days ago and was highly supportive of the report and congratulated officers on its contents. I would at this point like to add my congratulations to Paul Martindale and the Leisure team for an excellent piece of work. The group made a number of recommendations which are set out in the supplementary agenda pack issued yesterday, but it was agreed that none of these were sufficiently major that the report could not be brought to today's executive for sign-off. So turning to the report itself, the pandemic has clearly put even more emphasis on the importance of leisure activities to the health and well-being of the population. West Berkshire Council currently runs 7 leisure centres, the Lido and Hennick Worthy Sports Ground. All but Hennick are operated under a leisure management contract, which is in the process of being retendered. The approval of this strategy and the financial commitment behind it is very timely to give far greater certainty to the tender bids. The leisure portfolio, it is fair to say, is quite dated, with little significant investment in the last 20 years or so. Now is the time for us to invest again for the benefit of our residents and their mental and physical well-being. This investment will be through a mix of SIL money and borrowings from the Public Works Loan Board at low fixed interest rates, including the return of capital over a 40-year period. With the anticipated increase in usage and therefore revenue, the team is optimistic that the capital investment will be revenue neutral. The playing pitch strategy was approved in 2020 and fits well within this overall strategy, albeit the timescales are different, and the need to review it every 3 years with Sports England in the light of changing requirements. Along with Councillor Rick Jones and some WBC officers last week, I had the good fortune to be able to inspect the new 3G pitch recently opened at Deanfield School near Purley-on-Thames, and an extremely impressive facility it is. Funded in part by the school, in part by grants from the Football Foundation, and a significant contribution from this council, it is a major asset to the school's sporting facilities, as well as being a sports field for 2 local community clubs, and there are ambitious plans to extend that availability further. However, leisure is not just about leisure centres, pitches and swimming pools. It includes walking, running, racket sports, equestrian sports, cycling, and a whole host of other activities, all of which are being encouraged in this wide-ranging strategy. A clear set of objectives are outlined, which will be, which will be expanded upon in the delivery plan. I commend this strategy to Executive for approval.
Thank you, Councillor Wollaston. Councillor Bowick, do you wish to come in now, or are you going to reserve your rights?
I'll reserve my right, Leader. Thank you.
Okay, members of the Executive, do you have any questions? Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Leader. Not so much a question as an observation. As a member of the Eastern area, we're often reminded by our residents that we don't get things, that everything's in Newbury, and I think, you know, I know in conversation with Councillor Wollaston there are other things that are on the table for defining, but I think the football pitch mentioned at Deanfield School is of particular bonus to the area, and I'm grateful for that and for the continuing conversations we have.
Thank you, Councillor Sumner. Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. I was at the OSMC, so I'm a little surprised at the kind of takeout that's from that meeting. Yeah, I think we were all agreed that there was a lot of pressure to bring this leisure strategy forward because of the various issues associated with it being so delayed. However, I did raise at that meeting that I did have concerns about the response, and you know, even this revised response consists of 505 valid responses out of basically 160,000 people. So the way we're going about engaging with the public in terms of figuring out what they want as a leisure strategy seemed miles away from what we really need. And that leads to I think there were also some workshops. Unfortunately, when it came to OSMC, there was no detail provided about how many people attended the 9 different workshops. So it could be 9 people, it could be 99 people. I wasn't able to find that information out on the night, and it's not in the report. So I'm left with basically, I don't know, and it's a very small number. Am I keeping you awake, Councillor McKinnon? Sorry. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, so once you have such a low response, then yeah, you may have set a strategy, and we definitely need one. And yes, it did get approved at OSMC. However, I will be urging, and I am urging the council to rapidly look at that strategy. Others may come to it, because it certainly doesn't cover leisure and strategy as a whole, as was identified for OSMC. And I won't bore everybody with the details of what else was talked about at the night, because you can watch the video on YouTube. Councillor Wollaston also just mentioned that, you know, we haven't had any investment or little investment for 20 years. I totally agree. 18 years of conservatism gives you that. So yes, we need a leisure strategy. Yes, I'm quite happy to see something come forward, but it's not a complete strategy, and it needs a lot of work, and I'll be happy to help with that given an opportunity. But yes, I'm sure you'll vote it through anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Abbs. Councillor Wollaston, is there anything you wish to say in response to that?
Yes, it was explained in the OSMC meeting that a lot of the additional work that needs to be done will be within the delivery plan, which is scheduled over the next few months. And I'm sure that will come back to OSMC in time.
Thank you, Councillor Wollaston. Councillor Macro.
Thank you, Leader. As echoing something that Councillor Sumner said, really, and looking through the usage statistics and the activity statistics in the report, it's notable that they're very low in places like Pangbourne and Thiel and so on. And if you look at a map on page 105, you find those are the wards that are kind of aren't served by a leisure centre. And not only that, but it's very difficult to get to any of the other leisure centres by public transport. So I hope that from what Councillor Somner has said, there's something that's going to be done to address this. And they'll be very welcome in our area. As Councillor Somner says, we often get on the doorstep, oh, we don't get anything from Newbury. They don't say West Berkshire Council, they say from Newbury, because they see these facilities going on elsewhere, but nothing in Thiel and Pangbourne and Bradfield. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to come back on that, Howard, Councillor Wollaston?
Certainly. We have done quite a lot of research into this, and in theory, there is sufficient provision, but I do share the view of Councillor Macro that we should be looking more at the east. But clearly, the leisure team is relatively small, and we have to do things incrementally. So it will be next on the list after we've dealt with these current projects. I would think we're talking about the middle to end of this decade.
This decade?
Middle to end off. We're
22
already, Councillor Macro. So I'm talking about onwards from 2025.
I was going to welcome what you said. I'm not sure that I do now. Sorry.
Thank you both. Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. In the summary report, it lists a number of financial figures. So it's got the money for the Lido in there. It's got 175k earmarked for Hennick. As in your opening statement, you alluded to, Hennick isn't run under the same way as the other sites across the district are. It is a joint management committee in part with Thatcham Town Council. And I've served on the Hennick JMC since 2007. So I know the JMC, I know the site well. I think that putting up a figure of 175k for Hennick without saying what it's for is potentially worrying for local residents around that site. And as you said, the delivery plans to be worked on. I think if a delivery plan could come out alongside a strategy, then I think you might get some more buy-in from residents straight away on that. And so I'd be keen, what in your view is that 175k for Hennick about? We spoke about the east of the district. Actually, I don't think Thatcham's had anything new per se in the town in the last 20 years either. So I don't think it's the east of the district and the west of the district that misses out. I think it's the whole district that misses out when it comes to leisure provision over the last 20 years. And I think you've alluded to that with your strategy. So for me, the areas particularly around borders is what can we do more with existing leisure facilities? Because look, if I want to go swimming, I just want to go swimming. I don't really care if I'm swimming in a pool that's owned by my council or owned by a private enterprise or owned by Reading Borough Council, as long as I get it at a fair value. And so what are we doing with other local authorities so that our residents in Lambourne can go to Swindon, and residents in the east can go into Reading, for example, there. At OSMC, the transport links that Councillor Macro talks about from rural areas was mentioned. And I know the chair of OSMC, Councillor Law's response to that was within the strategy, it talks about enhancing parish halls. Absolutely would support the enhancement of parish halls, but they are only suitable for certain types of activity, not indoor football or anything like that potentially, due to the nature of the floors and the windows, etc. So I think they're my comments, Leader. There's a couple of questions in there as well. Obviously, we're going to welcome infrastructure investment in our leisure facilities. And I think just the final point I'll finish on, Leader, is the bent in the strategy more towards sport rather than general leisure. But again, I think that was some learning that was picked up from OSMC, but I think worthwhile pulling it up again here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. Over to you, Councillor Wollaston.
Can I start off with Hennick? I mean, clearly Hennick is a tricky site because there's a lot of local objection to its use at all. And there's another plan for a master plan, as I'm sure you're aware, to look at the overall use of that site and what we can do to maximise the benefits from it. There is within the plan a proposal to enhance the Thatcham Leisure Centre. It's not that significant, I'll be quite honest, but it is an improvement on what we have at the moment. And finally, you mentioned the cross-border issue. The study that was done by outside consultants did actually look at the whole of the area, including through from Vale of Whitehorse down to Basingstoke, across to, I think, as far as Bracknell even. And that, I think, is what's come up with the view that there's actually not an immediate need for a swimming pool in particular in the east. But my personal view is I'd like to see that something that we as West Berkshire Council produce.
Thank you both. Councillor Abbs, I'm not coming to you. You've had your opportunity this evening, so I wasn't.
If you could bear
intending to
with me,
come
Jerry, it was a message that I got by a chat from Eric, Councillor Patton.
back. In which case, I'm sorry, I'm not taking people that aren't present and have given their apologies either. So thank you, Councillor Abbs.
Thank you very much.
Does anyone else have any questions that hasn't had the opportunity? In which case, I'm going to Councillor Bowick.
Thank you, Leader. Leader, I want to thank Councillor Williston for bringing forward this for our consideration. We know, don't we, that how important to the health and well-being of our children and young people are sport and outdoor activities of all kinds. I was reminded only today that we give all our children in care a West Berkshire card, which makes it easier for them to use our leisure centres. This strategy will improve the quality of our provision and raise participation of all our children and young people, whatever their needs. And I'm very happy to second the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Bowick. In which case, we have a recommendation before us, which is that the executive approves the new leisure strategy. Can I ask executive members to vote by using their microphone in favour of the proposals to approve the recommendation? Thank you. I can see from my microphone that everybody has approved that recommendation and therefore it is carried. Can we move forward then to item 9 of the redevelopment of Northcroft Lido? Councillor Wollaston, I understand you'd like to propose this report.
Thank you, Leader.
And I am going to second this report. So Councillor Wollaston, over to you.
Sorry, members, you must be getting sick and tired of my voice tonight. Newbury's historic Lido was originally opened in the 1880s, an upgrade to the current version in the 1960s. Sadly, these days it is looking very outdated, made worse by the pressure from groundwater underneath virtually breaking its back every year, leading to regular repairs and a swimming season frequently restricted to just over 2 months. Essentially, it is at the end of its economic life without very significant investment. The initially estimated £5 million scheme will lead to a planning application for a 50-metre Olympic-length pool with a splash pool, water jets and water slides. The changing rooms will be completely revamped in a beach-style type design. It will be fully disabled compliant, and there will be a phase 2 of a cafe selling hot and cold food tied into the proposed £4 million upgrade of Northcroft Leisure Centre in 2024-25. There will be a further plank in the mental and physical health and well-being strategy, particularly relevant in these post-pandemic times. It would, of course, be environmentally compliant and carbon zero, using current technology to limit energy costs such as solar panels and ground source heat pumps. More importantly, it will be open for swimming for at least 6 months of the year, from Easter until September, and the Council is open to extending this further if there is public demand and it is viable. It is proposed to finance the scheme through borrowing from the Public Works Loan Board at a fixed-term low interest rate over a 40-year term. We estimate that the usage will increase from the current 20,000 to 50,000 visitors a year, so the project should be self-financing. The Council undertook a wide-ranging consultancy exercise on these proposals, including a public webinar in which I took part. There is overwhelming public support to create a state-of-the-art facility fit for the 21st century, of which Newbury and West Berkshire can be proud. We also considered and rejected a possible private sector solution. Our conclusion was we wanted to keep the Lido affordable for the public and not to become an expensive private club. I would hope that the planning application will be uncontroversial, and if so, the new Lido will be open for swimming in July 2023. The only downside is that the need for current and urgent repairs, the underlying structure, means that it will have to remain closed for this summer. There is much to look forward to. The report outlines the procurement strategy using the Denbighshire County Council UK Leisure Framework so as to ensure minimum delays, minimum building cost inflation, and allow our residents to use this facility with the least possible disruption. I commend this report for approval by Executive so that we can commence with the design appointments to allow for an early planning application.
Thank you, Councillor Wollaston. Members of the Executive, do you have any questions for Councillor Wollaston? No, in which case I'm going to go to Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Leader. Apologies for not being in the room, but I've got to go and sing at 7:30, and I may miss my question. But you know, as a Newbury councillor, obviously, I'm very pleased to see this go ahead, although it's a district facility used right across the district and beyond. It is a shame it can't be open this summer. That was going to be a question. I hadn't realised that the necessary repairs mean that it's going to have to stay closed this summer anyway. But you know, after all the problems of COVID, it would have been lovely to have it open. Even now, the day was warm enough to enjoy the Lido today. I mean, the only thing that surprised me, and I only read this in the paper, was that there's quite a bit of dry side work as well, which wasn't sort of part of the Lido report at OSMC, I don't think. Again, I'm pleased to see that. Slightly disappointed that we couldn't work out a way whereby the Lido could be actually completely separated in terms of management, because there was talk about running it as a community interest company. But okay, I understand the arguments, but that's what I wanted to comment on. Not really a question there, because Councillor Wollaston has preempted the answer.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers, in which case I won't go back to Councillor Wollaston at this point, but I'll go across to Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Very quick one, really. Obviously, with inflation starting to gallop away and rumours of reaching 10% and so on, do we have an assurity that we've taken that into account in the numbers that we're looking at?
Councillor Wollaston?
To the best we can, Councillor Raz, but as you rightly point out, it's a moving feast a little bit. Yep. The plan to go through the PWLB, I have got some figures from the Section 151 officer, which indicate that the repayments over the 40-year period, including repayment of capital, is something just over £200,000 a year. So the increased usage should more than cover that cost. And we hope we do have some points in the report where some of the work could be cut back if costs run away with themselves, although I personally would be reluctant to do that.
Thank you.
Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, thank you. Not a question, just a comment, Leader, and it's just to put on sort of formal record our group's support for the Lido. You know, I grew up using it as a kid, and my mum ferrying a load of us off the estate up to there. So it's not just for the benefit of Newbury residents, this site. You know, the whole of West Berkshire do get to benefit from it. You know, it's a not just the pool. It's about having the lawns as well, you know, and obviously it's being enhanced as well now. So yeah, we're looking forward to it being open and looking forward to having a swim. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Dillon. And I'm going to come back in there because I don't think it's just the residents of West Berkshire either. I think it will actually attract people from all around. There aren't that many outdoor swimming pools left in the country. Some people are closing them and we're investing in them. And I think that really is testimony to us here in West Berkshire and what we're trying to do here. Outdoor swimming is proving really popular and growing in popularity. So I'm really pleased to see this. Like you, I spent many a happy teen year sat around that pool with friends. I have very, very fond memories of it. And I think, judging by the response to the consultation, whereby we had 715 people, and what did we get? 675 of them were positive about investing in this. I have to just come back on a little point earlier around the draft, the leisure strategy. We have to remember that nobody has invested in this pool since 1960, and therefore it really does need the time and attention that is required now. And it's really disappointing, I know, for a lot of residents who will not have the use of that pool this summer, but the long-term future of the pool is really the priority here. And the fact that people will be using it, we all get very frustrated. And I know it's one of the most popular questions that come through to the council: when will the Lido open? We get 10 to 12 weeks at the moment, and I think, you know, really going into a period where we'll have 6 months of use, unless people feel brave in March. I'm not going down that particular route, so I'm really delighted to see this report coming forward this evening. More than happy to second it, and I look forward to the time when I'll be able to take probably grandchildren down to that pool. So thank you for bringing it to Councillor Wollaston. More than happy to second this report, and I would ask members of the executive to vote by using their keypad if they're happy to go forward with the recommendations, which are really around appointment of award of contract and enabling that award of contract to move this forward. They're set out for you in 2.1A and B. And if I can ask all members of the executive to vote by using their keypads. And that has been carried. So we will move forward with the Lido, the redevelopment of Northcroft Lido. Can we therefore move on to item 10 on this evening's agenda, which is the update on future working arrangements for the Public Protection Partnership. Once more, we do have a part 1 and a part 2, so open for discussion in part 1, but the vote will not take place until part 2. Councillor McKinnon, I believe you're going to propose this.
I would like to propose the recommendations in section 2.
And I am going to second them. However, I believe I'm going to hand over to Councillor Cole to introduce the report.
Thank you, Leader. This is the final paper which draws to a conclusion the arrangement for Wokingham's withdrawal from the Joint Public Protection Partnership, the full details of which are laid out in the part 2 item on the agenda. Although we've had 10 very successful years of partnership working with Wokingham and latterly Bracknell Forest, Wokingham now wants to concentrate more on their localities agenda, which means that the full offering of the Joint Public Protection Partnership no longer fits this requirement. I am, however, pleased to say that following a successful negotiating period, Wokingham will be buying back certain services from the partnership, including trading standards, air quality monitoring, food standards, animal health, and the services provided by the case management unit. These commissioned services will operate under an inter-authority agreement. In addition to reducing the final financial risk to the council, there are also significant operational benefits to this approach, as it will allow the Public Protection Partnership to maintain high levels of service to the community. I'm sorry, I don't. He's obviously agreeing.
Somebody has a different view there, Councillor.
Yes, excuse me. Excuse me.
Councillor Cole, was there anything you wish to add, or had you finished?
I just wanted to say that the report also sets out the bilateral partnership arrangements between Bracknell Forest and West Berkshire, and I'd like to thank the parties from all 3 authorities for the positive way in which the negotiations have been conducted. The Part 2 report sets out the additional detail about the settlement sum payable by Wokingham Borough Council associated in the termination of the original agreement. And I ask that Executive approve the proposed governance arrangements for the new bilateral service as set out on pages 225 and 226 of the agenda, and note that full council will also be asked to approve them at the annual meeting. Thank you, and apologies for the dog.
Okay, the joys of Zoom, Councillor Cole. Does anyone have anything they wish to add to that? I can see Councillor Bridgman's put his hand up, and then Councillor McKinnon. Councillor Bridgman.
Leader, thank you. Something I know Councillor Cole was going to deal with until she was so rudely interrupted by her canine, and I'm not being interrupted by mine at the moment, which is excellent, was that there was discussion just prior to Executive about one of the recommendations in the paper, and that is the recommendation, I think it's at E, to note the proposed government's arrangements. Now, the point being made there is that, in fact, because this is partly, this committee, the JPPC, is sort of part executive and part council. So I have a proposal. I can't obviously propose it out of the room, but I'd like to ask you to hear the words and maybe take this on board when you make your proposal as to the recommendations. And that is to change the wording to the following, and this has been shared with officers, so they do have the words, to approve the proposed governance arrangements for the new bilateral service, and note that full council will be asked to also approve them at the annual meeting. just to make it clear that those governance arrangements are part exec and part council. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Bridgman. We will take that on board when we get to the vote. Councillor McKinnon.
Yep, thanks, Leader. Yeah, Graham, Councillor Bridgman beat me to it. I think as I've proposed the report, I think I need to also propose that amendment as Councillor Bridgman's just mentioned. But so I'd like to do that now.
Okay, thank you. I will take that proposal, Councillor McKinnon, and I will second it as a seconder of the paper. Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. When this first came across my desk some while ago with the unfortunate news that the Conservative Front administration Wokingham wanted to leave, you know, I kind of asked the question, well, how much is it going to cost us? And the answer came back fairly clearly at the time that...
Are we going into part 2 here, Councillor Abbs?
No, I'm not going to mention a number that's not already in part 1, as far as I'm aware anyway. This is part 1, as I've got in front of me, so I'm only using stuff that's here. Well, if you think I am, please let me know. But yeah,
I was just reminding you. I know how people tend to get the two straight, but if you're sticking to it, I'm quite happy.
Yeah, no. Well, the assurance was that basically it wasn't cost us anything. But when we go, and we will go into it in more detail in part 2, I'm sure. But the reality is that it's a percentage game at the end of the day, and we've had to analyse each part of what it takes to tear something apart and cost it up and so on and so forth. So it's the I'm just making sure I've got not the private bit in front of me. I'm pretty sure I haven't. It mentions that they are responsible for 34%. So can you confirm that that's okay to use that number? It's on page, I don't know, it's mentioned a few times anyway.
Well, you've used it, so I assume it's in part 1.
Well, it's not an actual number, it's a percentage. And the point being, when you use a percentage, is that sounds great, except for if you think you're working on a perspective of actually you've chosen to leave, so therefore you should burden the full costs of leaving that you've imposed on the remaining parties. And that's the bit I really would, want to dive in. I want that to be public, because I think it was a mistake that they're going. I wish they weren't. And the fact that they've chosen to leave a bunch of services with us shows that they've partially come around to that way of thinking as well. And I'm just hope that, if there's happens to be a change of regime over there in next year or later or as soon as possible, that we'll welcome them back, because I think we'd all agree a bigger entity is far more efficient than breaking things down into smaller and smaller parts. So it's really the bringing out that 34% and focus on, how careful we need to be that we've actually done the right thing here, and that we can look at that in part 2, if that's okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Abbs, and I'm sure Councillor Cole will come back to that in part 2 to give you the details behind that. Is that? Did you want to come back in at the moment, Councillor Cole?
Well, I can. Looking at, I think Councillor Abbs is referring to point 4.8 in the part 1 paper, where it says that the Public Protection Partnership have adapted its budget to manage the reduction as a result of Wokingham leaving the partnership. That's the amount that Wokingham would have paid into the partnership had they remained into it. So as the partnership is now bilateral, the budget has naturally had to be adjusted.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Councillor McKinnon, are you wishing to come back in here?
Yeah, just to say, I think Councillor Abbs might got the wrong end of the stick there when he's talking about the bits in the table on page 231, the 34%. Those are the costs of work that's currently committed to by the PPP, and Wokingham are agreeing to continue to pay that because it's currently committed. It's not 34% of the costs of leaving, which is not quite what's going on.
And that's not what I was saying either. So we're too close to part 2 to go into the detail.
Let's take this into part 2, members. I think that probably be easiest as far as this is concerned. So we're not going to vote on this anyway at this moment in time. Let's take that into discussions in part 2 then. Can we move forward then to item 11 on your agenda this evening, which is the Capital Financial Performance Report for quarter 3. Councillor McKinnon, I understand you'd like to propose this.
Yes, please, Leader.
Does that find a seconder?
Yes, it does, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowick. Over to you, Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you, Leader. This is the Q3 update on the capital programme for 2021-22. We on the Executive are rightly proud of our capital programme, which invests in the future of our district with new schools, improved roads, active transport infrastructure, outstanding new sports facilities, environmental projects and much more. Projected capital investment for the year is 42.3 million. That's a forecast underspend of 11.7 million against the revised capital budget. Of course, as I said before in these updates, that underspend doesn't mean the projects have been lost, merely delayed, and the vast majority of the projects will be delivered in the next financial year. As well as the general pressure on supply chains being experienced worldwide with unfortunate knock-on effects in the delivery of infrastructure projects, there are a range of individual project-specific reasons for some of the delays. The delay to upgrades to Thiel Railway Station, which is being delivered in partnership with Network Rail and GWR, that accounts for 2 million of the underspend. Delays to playing pitch planning permissions accounts for 1 million, and nearly 1 million from delays to the separate food waste collection project due to industry shortages of vehicles and bins. But all in all, our vital and outstanding capital programme remains on track over the medium term to deliver outstanding new amenities and environmental improvements for all of our residents. Thanks, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. Members of the Executive, do you have any questions for Councillor McKinnon? Councillor Bowick, do you wish to come back in here?
I'll wait my turn. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chairman. The report's comprehensive, and we do understand the difficulties we're having in supply chains at present. We normally have some sort of rollover, but what I don't, of capital expenditure into the following year, this is about 20%, it seems, that will be rolled forward. What isn't clear in the report, and I wonder if we can make it more clear, is just how much of the 54 million will have been allocated at year end, contract let, purchase order, as opposed to we haven't got round to doing anything at all with that money. I think it's a very useful distinction and would add something to the report, which in other respects is very comprehensive about slippage and the like. I hope that's clear what I'm getting at there.
Yeah, it is clear, Councillor Brooks. I think that'd be useful information as well. I don't know how much it is offhand, but I'll take it away and get back to you.
Thank you both. Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I appreciate that this is a financial report, so it talks more about the impact on the money. But what I'm interested in is what's the impact on our residents of not spending the money. And I've asked it before, so if a school's not going ahead, what's that going to mean for its class intake in September? Will it have a crowded classroom, for example? i.e. we're investing this money to solve a problem. So if it's not being spent, how much of the problem is still there? And so some commentary like that in future reports would be useful. And just to pick up on Councillor Brooks's point there, under 4.2b, where it's given some summary of where different directorates are underspent. It says a 2.3 million underspend is forecast. The main underspends are on the playing pitch action plan, 1 million, and the expansion of the Berkshire records, both due to delays in securing planning permission. Now, I'm assuming the top one is the sports hub planning permission there. And so, but that would never have been spent today unless it's just at contract award point. So I appreciate you would have had a contract in place potentially earlier without planning, but you wouldn't have spent £1 million on that site by now if you'd passed planning, just a few weeks earlier. So I think the descriptions of committed spend is really useful, and I said, and some impact assessment on our actual residents would be good as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. In terms of the impact on individual services, noted and agreed. No argument on that. I think on the 1 million in the playing pitch, this is referring to an underspend against the original capital budget, which would have been set way back March 21. At that point, there was certainly a hope that things would have progressed a lot quicker than they are now. So it may well have been the fact we were planning on sort of having spent that by now. Where we are now at Q3, we know that the planning didn't come to whenever it was, but so I think it was. But first point, agreed.
Councillor Macro.
Thank you, Leader. I note that there's a reprofiling request in for a modest sum of £15,000 for a noise investigation for Field Bypass. If my memory is correct, that was reprofiled from last year. I continue to get complaints from residents about noise from the bypass, which has increased dramatically in recent years, particularly at night time with a large number of heavy trucks taking the bypass. So could I please ask that this doesn't have to be reprofiled yet again next year? Can we get on with it and do it, please?
All right. I will take that request to the service, Councillor Macro.
Thank you, everybody. Councillor Bowick, do you wish to come back now?
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yes, I'm always pleased when Councillor McKinnon asks me to support his capital programme papers. Education forms a significant part of that programme, by no means dominant, but it's the effectiveness of the programme is testified by our outstanding success yet again this year of allocating places in schools of parents' choice for our young people. I'll just come back, if I may, to Councillor Dillon's point about question really around what effect these underspends in education will have. I don't think you need to fear about places not being provided for schools for children, because we're doing very well at that. The point around the delay to the iCollege provision in Badger Hill actually very politely refers to procurement related delay. Yes, it has caused, that will cause us a challenge, but the education service is working in a very imaginative way to make sure that the students who attend will be given improved facilities very soon. Parsons down rationalisation, that's not a question of providing more space, rather it's reprofiling the accommodation that we already have there to make it more effective, if you like. And Garland School is similarly, it's around providing better facilities, which will be delayed, but will arrive in due course. I'm delighted to second this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowick. We have a recommendation laid out before you all, which is that we note the report and we approve the proposed reprofiling of the 10.9 million of future expenditure from 2021-22 into the financial year 22-23. Can I ask members of the executive to use your keypads on your microphones to see if you approve those recommendations? Thank you. I can see that those have been approved and those recommendations are therefore carried. We can now move forward to item 12 on this evening's agenda, which is the performance report for Q3. Councillor Wollaston is going to introduce this report. It is to note, therefore, there is no requirement for it to be seconded, but over to you, Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Leader. The Council continues to perform well, as evidenced by the key indicators, and officers deserve to be congratulated. Exceptions generally relate to the impact of COVID, such as council tax and business rates collection, but they are coming back into line with past indicators. Despite inflationary trends, indicators such as footfall in Newbury Town Centre and car park receipts were up, suggesting economic resilience. But I would remind members that these are Q3 figures before the Ukrainian war and its impact on increased living costs, particularly for energy. Members of the executive are happy to answer any particular questions on their portfolios, or where they can, or revert with written answers where necessary. I'd like to ask the executive to note the progress made in delivering the council strategy delivery plan for 2019 to 2023.
Thank you, Councillor Wollaston. Members of the executive, do you have any questions for Councillor Wollaston? Councillor Stewart, I can see your hand raised.
It was basically to cover a couple of points on the paper. So would you like me to do that now?
Please do.
Okay, lovely. I just wanted to point out, as I have done before, but for anybody that hasn't seen this report before, in terms of adult social care, the charts that you will see for our measures have provisional marked on them, and that's because these have to be validated by the Department of Health and Social Care. So at the next report, you'll see the final figures that are validated go in. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that and this is really about the next paper that will be coming in Q4. Unfortunately, the measure for care homes, which is rated good in this report, will next quarter reflect the result of the recent CQC inspection for Birchwood. I won't say any more at this point, but I thought it was just right to mention it here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Leader. I've read through all of the exception reports. Obviously, where a target hasn't been met, the officers and members have outlined the reason why and any mitigation measures. And actually, on all of them, I think they're a fair exception report. And there's clearly COVID pressures that have impacted on individual services. And actually, the one I'd like to pull out is the one that I often used to battle with Councillor Bridgman on, I think, which was the amount of days to pay a benefit. And I see it's just over target. The target's 20 days, it's 20.19. So I'm actually congratulating officers for getting so close to that target, because if you read the exception report, it's not only their normal casework, but obviously all the COVID grants that they've been processing as well has seen a huge up rate in that department. So I think to get even close to target when your workload has increased that much is a testament to the processes and their management within that team. So congratulations from me on that. And then the only other comment I'd like to pick up on is a worrying one, again, not directly because of West Berkshire Council, but is that increase in domestic abuse incidents that we've seen an uptick in Q3 from Q2. We all felt, I think, when we first went into lockdown, that there was some real concern about safeguarding various vulnerable residents. And I think it shows that we were right, because actually, as services are now reopening, as we are seeing referrals from various agencies, we're seeing those numbers pick up. So we need to make sure that we've got the right support packages in place, to support our residents across all of those vulnerable categories, because I'm sure as domestic abuse is ticking up, we'll also see that across a range of other indicators as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. I'm going to let Councillor Bridgman come back to you on that point on domestic abuse, because I can see he raised his hand and I'm assuming that is what he wants to do.
And you assume correctly, Leader. Indeed, Councillor Dillon, what I would say is a lot of work, as I'm sure you appreciate, is going on in this arena. Domestic Abuse Board is meeting. We are putting together all sorts of packaging work, and you know that we brought a paper to executive last time round about accommodation. So I can assure you that this is a matter that is clearly on my agenda and the agenda of officers. So we are doing what we can, but clearly domestic abuse is to a certain extent outside the hands of anybody. It's in the hands of the perpetrator. What we can do on two fronts. One, we try to avoid it, try to stop it, try to put as much intervention in as possible. But the other is to deal with the aftermath in as best a way as we can. I can really say no more than that.
And interestingly, I can, because I've worked quite a bit in this, but the increase in referrals coming through is actually sometimes a positive, that people are having the courage and conviction to come through and actually report those. So it's one of those where it's quite an interesting one to watch, because actually sometimes the raising of awareness is working and we're getting more people coming through. So actually it's something we would want to see increase, but not, if that makes sense. Councillor Brooks.
Chairman, page 264. We have council tax in which I think will be red. It looks more like a muddy brown. At 82.1% collection rate, we do understand on this side the difficulties that COVID is having an impact on customers' ability to pay. But how might that play into a budget outturn where we will forecast a 40k overspend? Is that all factored in, and you're still content with your budget forecast? Your forecast, expenditure forecast for the year, and a slightly related note below it. You could argue the same point, but why is that green when it still seems so low against the greater than or equal to 97% target? It's confusing, and I'd like some clarification, please.
I'll hand over to Councillor McKinnon.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. I think I'm right in saying that this one stays red until quarter 4 because it's the cumulative amount we've collected up to this point. And we're still collecting some in quarter 4. So it's not a 82% against where we should be by now. It's 80% of the year's entire collection. So you'd expect it to be showing those figures. I'm sort of looking over to my executive director to give me the thumbs up, and yeah, that is the case. Well, no, with council tax, no, because a lot of people don't pay in February and March. So you would collect more in the first 3 quarters. So you'd expect that to be higher than 75. At the outturn, I'd expect to be much closer to that 98.8.
Even with the COVID problems you're having, then you still believe you'll catch up?
Well, we're higher than the equivalent period last year.
Not by much, but okay. And why is non-domestic rates green?
I think that might be a formatting issue, Councillor Rooks.
I'll have to be colourblind, and a bit of
consistency between the two needs to be done. Yeah.
Thank you both. Members, this is to note this report, so there is no requirement to vote, but we will keep monitoring our performance as we go forward as it delivers against our council strategy. So thank you for bringing it to us, Councillor Wollaston. Can we move on then to item 13 this evening, which is the Berkshire Digital Infrastructure Group, the collaboration agreement. Councillor Wollaston, I understand you'd like to propose this report.
Yes, please, Leader.
And does this find a seconder?
Happy to second, Leader, and I'll reserve my right.
Thank you, Councillor Sumner. Over to you, Councillor Wollaston.
I would hope that this is the most straightforward of my 4 papers this evening. Members will possibly recall that the Digital Infrastructure Group comprises the 6 Berkshire unitaries set up to roll out digital infrastructure across Berkshire. In our case, the first phase of superfast broadband is all but completed, with 99% connected. The group is now working on the gigabit project to get this level of connectivity available to all by 2025. Berkshire is way ahead of the game, and I'm pleased to say that West Berkshire is by far the most successful of the unitaries. The group has been successful in being awarded a grant of £500,000 to be a pilot for Digital Connectivity Infrastructure Accelerator, and please do not ask me what that means. We are the lead authority on this. And to get the grant, we need to authorise our chief executive to enter into the collaboration agreement with the other 5 unitaries. There are no financial or other implications. It is total upside. There is also the carrot of further grant aid to follow. The Thames Valley Berkshire LEP have taken the decision not to be part of the consortium, although they are highly supportive. They were not a contributor to the upcoming project, which has attracted DCMS funding, so there is no substantive effect on the project or its associated funding. I hope totally uncontroversial and propose that the executive provides our chief executive with authority to sign the agreement.
Can I just come in there? Because of the last sentence, you've said the recommendation on the paper needs to be altered, and I think you need to propose that alteration. So whereas it currently reads that the delegated authority of the chief executive to enter into with the other 5, you're asking for the removal of and the Thames Valley Berkshire Local Enterprise Partnership. So the removal of that one line is your proposal this evening, is it, Councillor Wollaston?
That's correct, Leader.
And Councillor Sumner, are you happy to second that amendment?
Indeed, Leader.
Thank you. Okay, that is what we are debating here this evening. Members of the Executive, do you have any questions for Councillor Wollaston on this? Councillor Arderwater.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And again, I fully endorse this paper. I'm normally very sceptical about large, broad government initiatives involving the complex collection of words which Councillor Wollaston uttered just now. I won't attempt to answer the question. However, on this occasion, I do concur this is a really good thing for us to be doing. And again, it's firstly, there are, while superfast broadband has successfully delivered a lot of better connectivity to businesses and residents across the district, in particular in our rural areas, the opportunities ahead to further improve the environment, I'm thinking more here for businesses, are immense, and the reduction in bureaucracy, the enablement of getting through our processes and other authorities' processes is huge. So again, I fully think this is a really good project, and I'm delighted that we have already played such a strong part, and there is the opportunity to go still further with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Arderwater. Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. First of all, I know we're saying, oh, superfast, isn't it great? 99%, I think it mentions in there. There are thousands of homes that are still at the 2 to 10 meg a bit. I don't know. So I wish we would kind of take a step aside and think about those thousands of homes that are in such digital poverty right now and address them before we start thinking about lots of other stuff. Let's get everybody. And it means moving away from the standard players that we're currently playing with, the GigaClears and so on. So, just please, that's not say the job's done when it's actually not, John. It's not 100%, and that small percentage, and it is a small percentage, I admit, is still thousands of homes. I happen to be one of them, which is how I'm able to monitor it every day. I'm still down at 2 megabits per second, so I have to make my own way onto the internet by alternate means. The other thing that struck me about this, and Councillor Wollaston, you just said for the project to commence. I'm be happy to play the recording back. However, risk management says a date of expected to commence the 11th of March. And then further down in the paper, 5.18 it says it must commence by the 11th of March. I haven't got a time machine. So what does that really mean? Thank you.
I can answer that. The work has already commenced.
So
we have hit the timescale. That is why it is so urgent to get this collaboration agreement signed as quickly as possible.
How is it commenced without an agreement?
I think everyone just took a view, Councillor Abbs, that it was going to happen.
Oh, well, that's good then.
Do you want to come back on Councillor Abbs's point around the connectivity in those
Yes,
spots?
I'm very happy to do so as well. We are at 99%, as I stated. The equivalent figure for the rest of Berkshire is something around 70%. So we are doing significantly better than anybody else. And in my own ward, Upper Lambourne, which was one of the not spots, was fixed in the last month or so. And the team continues to get to finalise the remaining few that are missing, and I hope that will include you, Councillor Ebbs.
I can 100% assure you it won't.
Thank you. Councillor Berwick, I see you've lowered your hand. Members, we have a recommendation in front of us this evening, which is to delegate authority of the Chief Executive to enter the collaborative agreement with the other 5 authorities to forward the objectives of the digital infrastructure group and further associated agreements as appropriate. Can I ask members of the executive to vote using your microphone if you are in favour of these? Oh, gosh, I'm so sorry. Sorry, Councillor Sumner, I'm coming to you before I move that. Apologies.
It's all right, Leader. I thought I'd done something wrong there. And I will be very, very brief, but just for completeness to second it. I think as a lead authority, it's essential that we take the opportunity and recognise this collaborative approach, and that the Chief Executive delegation for a highly important provision across the county is agreed. Fair to say that this is an industry that doesn't sit still, so important to enable swift movement wherever we can. Happy to second the report, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Sumner, and apologies once more. Members, if I can ask you to vote using your keypad, if you accept the recommendations as laid out in this paper. Thank you, everybody. I can see that those recommendations have been accepted. Therefore, we can move on to item 14 on this evening's agenda, which is members' questions. First of all, I would like to thank all those members that have submitted questions for this evening's executive meeting. Your questions will appear on screen and will be answered by the relevant portfolio holder. You will then be given the opportunity to ask a supplementary question, but please remember that this must be to clarify the response provided and not introduce any new business. In accordance with paragraph 5.12 of the .9 of the Constitution, where questions have more than one question, only their first question will be answered. If after all other first questions have been asked and answered and there is sufficient time, we will answer subsequent questions. Please note that the time limit for members' questions is restricted to 60 minutes. And if your questions have not been answered in that time, you will receive a written response within 5 working days. The responses given either verbally at the meeting or in writing will be published on the Council's website. Before we begin, I have had notification from Councillor Culver that she's had to leave the meeting and therefore she will accept a written response to question A on your agenda this evening, and Councillor Cole will make sure that that is sent over to Councillor Culver, and therefore we're going to start with question B on this evening's agenda, which is Councillor Vickers to Councillor Cole. Over to you, Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you for your question, Councillor Vickers. It's anticipated that the findings and any actions relating to improving the condition of homes, which may include energy efficiency and savings on fuel, will be conducted over the next quarter. We have provided assistance to over 1,400 local residents via the Household Support Fund to assist with essential household items such as fuel and energy bills. And yesterday's spring statement from the Chancellor Rishi Sunak announcing the doubling of the Household Support Fund is welcomed. And we look forward to receiving the updated guidance. And I'm pleased that the Chancellor acknowledged that the local authorities are best placed to allocate this funding, which will continue to support our most vulnerable households. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Cole. So it's implied from what you say that the survey is completed. It's just that the report hasn't been written up and not ready to present. Would it be possible to give us some indication of how extensive the poor condition is in the private sector? Rough numbers to the nearest, couple of hundred or so.
I'm sorry, Councillor, because perhaps I misled you. There has been a delay because of the impact of COVID-19 on statutory services, such as housing and public protection, and therefore the action's been reprioritised and the delivery plan updated as a result. So we are somewhat behind our plan because of COVID, which I'm sure you'll understand. But actually, what we are doing with households who are experiencing financial difficulties due to energy costs, we are directing them to various services on our website, as well as the the government warm home discount scheme. So although the survey is delayed, we are helping people with regard to fuel and energy support.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you both. Can we move on then to question C on this evening's agenda, which is Councillor Dillon to Councillor McKinnon.
I asked my public information question standing in its name.
Yeah, thanks for your question, Councillor Dillon. So in terms of the government's council tax energy rebate, the properties in council tax bands A to D will be eligible for £150. At present, it's estimated that 46,000 households qualify for that in West Berkshire. For those customers who pay their council tax by direct debit, the £150 payment will be made automatically and there's no need for an application to be made. For those customers in bands A to D who do not pay by direct debit, there will be a straightforward online or telephone application to complete via customer services. For these customers, there has to be an application process by government to sign. For those customers in council tax bands E to H, there will be a discretionary scheme which is being worked on by the team at present. In terms of our own local COVID hardship scheme, a further grant of up to £150 will be applied for 22-23 to those council tax reduction scheme claimants who are of working age, and no application is required for that. Do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, thank you for that question. With the greatest of respect, that's pretty much what the government guidelines say, is what you've read out there. And the guidelines go a little bit further and say that all payments should be made by September, but should be made as early as possible, particularly for those on direct debits. So could you give residents of West Berkshire a steer of should they expect that payment to come in April, or is it likely to hit in August? I think if residents are being given a £150 sum of money, to know when it's going to hit in the cycle will help with their budgeting.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I do not think they'll have to wait until September. I would expect it'll be a lot earlier than that.
Thank you both. Can we move on then to question D on this evening's agenda, which is Councillor Macro to Councillor Stewart.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Macro. Regrettably, Birchwood Care Home CQC rating has now been downgraded to requires improvement following a targeted inspection in February. The report has now been published and a statement made to the press, and we have also been very proactively communicating with service users, their families and staff within the service. Our other care homes, and indeed our other regulated services, reablement and shared lives, are all still rated good. But returning to Birchwood, I want to provide reassurance that we have a robust recovery plan in place, which is already showing good progress. I also want to be really clear that it was our own active communication with the CQC about concerns that we ourselves had, which led to the inspection visit. I believe this reflects positively on our transparency and openness to challenge. Birchwood itself is receiving a good deal of support and scrutiny from officers outside of the care home to give that external view, as well as focused attention from the newly appointed service manager, whose changed role will support and allow additional focus on all of our care homes. I have also instigated monthly meetings with the senior leadership team focused solely on our care home management and the recovery plan. And I just want to say, I can only function as the portfolio holder if I see myself as part of the team. I celebrate the highs and I feel the lows, as do our officers. We've been working very hard to resolve this and also to ensure that our other two care homes, No Trees in Kimpbury and Willow's Edge in Newbury, retain their good CQC grade, as do our other two regulated services that I mentioned earlier. These are personal commitments from me.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Macro, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Lynn. Could you assure me that lessons will be learned so that we do not run into this kind of problem again, please?
I absolutely can, Councillor Macro. And we have, so I've mentioned about the fact that we're now having monthly meetings for as long as we need to about our care home management. I think one of the most disappointing things for me, and also for officers involved as well, is that we knew from the previous inspection visit that we had some issues, but the overall rating was good. And it feels as if we allowed ourselves to be lulled into a false sense of security. So we have absolutely full pelt developed a recovery plan. As I say, we'll be talking about it every month, and you know, I will be accountable for that. I think there are some things that you can't guarantee in life. I'm learning pretty quickly that care home management is not an exact science, and that you can, much like any sort of regulated service, you can be putting in 100% effort, 100% resources, but a bump along the road may just knock you off track. But apart from that, everything that's within our control will be done.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Can we therefore move on to our last member's question for this evening, which is E, which is Councillor Abbs to Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Abs, for your question. As a neighbouring authority, the Council is consulted on such applications as out-of-district consultations, and both the Highway Authority and the Planning Authority respond. In certain circumstances, other parts of the Council will also respond, such as West Berkshire Lead Local Flood Authority. These responses will cover the aspects of the application and provide a technical response. They will also suggest any mitigation that would be needed if the planning application was to be approved. In the case of Washwater, if Basingstoke and Dean are minded to approve, then West Berkshire Council would wish to see S278 agreements or monies required for all off-site works and services provided by West Berkshire, and also planning obligations to transfer land to West Berkshire for biodiversity enhancement to include a 30-year maintenance. Do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor. I'm sure you've got the same concern high up, basically. I'm looking literally metres over the border, and I sit on various planning committees, so I see the information flow. And yes, I know that we get a chance to say, what about us, please? But given that it's a fellow Conservative-run council, I'm just wondering if we're dealing with them at a higher level to make sure that we have some kind of plan in place to try and, because I've seen, especially the Bishop's Green one. Washwater was bad enough, but the Bishop's Green one is really citing all sorts of things within our purview, if you like, Green the Green business development area and so on and so forth. And it just seems like because they run into trouble, they're kind of going, oh, well, that's okay. West Berkshire can take care of it for us. And though we are a statutory consultee on it, I realise that. I'm just hoping that we can do a little bit more at a more senior level to try and head that thing off. And if you can give me the surety, that's probably all we can do right now.
Yeah, what I can say is that irrespective of what colour tie they're wearing, if a neighbouring authority is taking such actions, then we will do whatever we can to have conversations with them. And there are regular leader conversations, and I'm sure regular chief executive conversations where I would think anything major, if it can be tabled, will be tabled. So yes, all I can do is assure you that for officers to give the technical part on planning grounds is the key thing. I think, and that from, as you said, your involvement in planning applications and committees. So yes, we will do whatever we can and have whatever conversations we can have.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you both, and thank you members for all your questions this evening. Councillor Pattleton will receive a written response from Councillor Bowick because I know he submitted a question. Can we therefore move to item 15, which is the exclusion of the press and public? And can I ask that all members agree to the exclusion of the press and public by voting on their microphone that the press and public leave the room in accordance with Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, sorry. I can see that has been carried. So if you could just confirm when we know that all members of press and public have left.